The movie begins in China, where a young girl named Wei is sketching a flower she found in her father's journal. Her father, a scientist, explains that it's a rare corpse flower known for its strong scent that attracts flies. As the scene unfolds, we see that both Wei and her father bear noticeable scars on their cheeks. Excitedly, her father reveals that he has developed something that could restore their appearance. Demonstrating his invention, he removes a piece of a rat's skin, injects it with his serum, and then applies it to his own face. Miraculously, the skin integrates perfectly, erasing his scar. Overjoyed by his breakthrough, he celebrates, until something goes horribly wrong. His skin begins to regenerate uncontrollably, quickly covering his mouth. Desperate, he slices it off with a scalpel, only for it to regrow instantly. Wei, terrified by what's happening, tries to help by cutting away the excess flesh, but in her frantic attempts, she unintentionally kills her father. Years later, Wei is now a brilliant young woman, much like her father. However, she lives with relatives who mistreat her, seeing her as an oddity. One day, she receives a scholarship to study at a university in New Zealand. Eager for a fresh start, she accepts immediately. Upon her arrival in New Zealand, Wei is greeted by her aunt Ling, who is thrilled to see her. On their way home, Ling explains that she's separated from her husband and that only Wei and her cousin Angela will be staying in the house, as she often travels for work. When they arrive, Angela greets Wei with indifference before heading off. Later that night, Wei sets up a small shrine for her father and speaks to his memory. The next morning, as she navigates her first day on campus, Wei meets a homeless man named John, who is visibly scarred. She asks him for directions, and after a brief introduction, she heads to her class. Inside, Professor Paul is delivering a lecture. Angela, who is popular among the students, sits with her close friends Eve and Jasmine, while Wei remains alone in the back. When test scores are handed out, Wei is the only one to achieve a perfect score, shocking the other students. After class, Wei visits the science lab to continue her father's research. Paul notices her working with a notebook full of Chinese writings and asks about it. Wei explains that it contains her father's unfinished work, which she hopes to complete. Impressed by her dedication, Paul offers her a position as his lab assistant, promising that if she proves herself, he might let her continue her research. Wei, thrilled by the opportunity, eagerly agrees. Later, Paul looks into Wei's father online and discovers that he had been working on experimental skin grafting. The next day, Wei attempts to befriend Angela, Eve, and Jasmine. Angela introduces her reluctantly, and Wei invites them to try traditional Chinese food with her. Though hesitant at first, they eventually agree. During the meal, Wei excitedly takes a selfie with the group, but the others aren't pleased. Angela, visibly embarrassed by her cousin, refuses to eat anything. In the end, she and Eve walk away without touching the food, leaving Wei hurt. Only Jasmine stays behind, tasting the dish before leaving with an apologetic look. On her way home, Wei crosses paths with John again, and they share a conversation. She tells him about her scars and her goal of creating something that could help people with disfigurements. John, however, reassures her that she's already beautiful. Later, Paul offers Wei a ride home and expresses his enthusiasm for their research. He believes they could achieve something groundbreaking together and suggests starting immediately the next morning. Wei is ecstatic. Over the following days, the two work hard on their experiments but struggle to make progress. Wei concludes that they need a binding agent to fuse the skin properly, though she's unsure what it could be. Paul, frustrated by the setbacks, starts doubting the project's success. One day, Jasmine visits the lab, asking if Paul is looking for an assistant. Without hesitation, he hires her, effectively replacing Wei. That evening, Jasmine approaches Wei, insisting she didn't mean to steal her position. She also encourages Wei to stop hiding her scars and tells her she's beautiful as she is. Moved by her kindness, Wei begins to see Jasmine differently from Angela and Eve. While looking through her father's notes, Wei comes across an image of the corpse flower, sparking an idea. That night, she sneaks into a nursery and steals some of the rare plants, believing they might hold the missing key to her research. Back at the lab, she immediately starts experimenting with the flowers. Meanwhile, in another room, Paul and Eve are engaged in an intimate moment, revealing that they're involved, or that Paul is merely using her for his own ends. Determined to prove her theory, Wei removes a small patch of skin from her thigh and applies her new formula. To her astonishment, the skin seamlessly merges back, healing as if untouched. Just then, Paul and Eve notice her presence and Paul goes to confront her. Wei eagerly explains her breakthrough. As she shows him her thigh, Eve misinterprets the situation and takes a picture. She then pulls Wei away under the pretense of a girls' night, leaving behind Wei's father's diary in the lab. Later, Paul contacts a friend to help translate the notebook's contents. Meanwhile, Angela receives Eve's photo, which makes it seem as though Wei was seducing Paul. Furious, she rushes home, only to find Wei missing. Elsewhere, Eve takes Wei to a secluded location and accuses her of trying to steal Paul. Wei insists she has no such intentions, but Eve refuses to believe her. She abandons Wei in the middle of nowhere and drives off. Hours later, Wei finally makes it home on foot, only to find Angela waiting for her in a rage. She's devastated to discover that her father's shrine has been destroyed. Angela accuses her of having an affair with a professor and refuses to listen to any explanations. The confrontation escalates into a brutal fight, with Angela gaining the upper hand. She pins Wei down and starts choking her. In a desperate act of self-defense, Wei grabs a nearby chopstick and drives it into Angela's eye, killing her instantly. Wei muttered bitterly, thinking how things would have been easier if Angela were as clueless as the others. But there was no time for regrets. She had to act fast. Dragging Angela's limp body into the bathroom, she carefully peeled a thin layer of skin from her face, injected it with a special compound she had developed, and pressed it against her own. The effects were immediate. Her reflection morphed, and soon Angela's face stared back at her. Admiring her new appearance, Wei beamed. The transformation was flawless. When Angela's mother returned home, she didn't suspect a thing, believing Wei to be her daughter. Satisfied with her success, Wei decided to fully embrace her new identity. The next morning, she confidently stepped onto campus as Angela, basking in the newfound attention. She effortlessly fooled Angela's friends Eve and Jasmine, even when she mistakenly used a more complex word in conversation. Fortunately, they were too oblivious to notice. Later that day, she went on a date with Angela's boyfriend in a secluded forest clearing. As he confessed his love, Wei, having never been in such a situation before, played along. They began kissing, until disaster struck. Angela's borrowed face suddenly peeled off, slipping onto the horrified boy. Panic set in as he tried to escape, but in his frantic attempt, he stumbled too far and plummeted off a cliff. Shaken, Wei rushed back home. Desperate, she reapplied the remaining substance to reattach Angela's face, but supplies were dwindling. She frantically searched for her father's notes, only to realize they were missing. It didn't take long to figure out that Paul had taken them, intending to claim the research as his own. Determined to stop him, Wei devised a plan. She invited Eve for a sleepover, masking her ulterior motives. Upon arriving, Eve wrinkled her nose at a strange odor, but Wei dismissed it, blaming her eccentric cousin's shrine. However, as the night progressed, Eve sensed something was off and attempted to leave. Wei struck first, grabbing a heavy object and swinging at her. Eve managed to escape, sprinting outside and diving into the pond. But Wei was relentless. She followed, plunging a drill into the water, making sure there was no way out. Moments later, Eve's lifeless body floated to the surface. Wei wasted no time. She skinned her, dyed her hair to match, and stepped into yet another identity. The next day at university, the presence of police investigating Angela's boyfriend's death sent Wei into a silent panic. Without hesitation, she hurried home, where she disposed of the bodies, chopping them up and dumping them into the pond. While going through Eve's phone, she stumbled upon a revealing photograph taken in the lab. Seeing an opportunity, she anonymously sent the image to university officials, falsely accusing Paul of inappropriate relations with a student. The scandal ruined him, and he was swiftly dismissed. However, he wasn't entirely devastated. He was on the brink of perfecting a groundbreaking scientific formula. Later in his laboratory, Paul finally succeeded in stabilizing the compound. Overjoyed, he texted Eve, inviting her over to celebrate. Little did he know, Wei had intercepted the message. Disguised as Eve, she visited his home, feigning excitement. As Paul retrieved a bottle of expensive wine, she took note of where he stored his valuables. When he wasn't looking, she discreetly retrieved a vial of the perfected substance and made her escape, pretending to have a headache. Shortly after, Paul sensed something was amiss. Checking his hidden compartment, he discovered the missing vial. Piecing the clues together, realization struck. Eve hadn't visited him. It was Wei all along, wearing yet another stolen face. Meanwhile, Wei returned home, shedding her disguise, but her troubles weren't over. Jasmine arrived looking for Angela and Eve. Thinking quickly, Wei lied, claiming they were away on a trip. Jasmine believed her, until she opened the fridge and came face to face with Eve's grotesquely preserved head. Before she could react, Wei wrapped plastic around her face, suffocating her. Sometime later, Paul arrived at Wei's house, demanding to know what she had done. She blamed him for everything, accusing him of stealing her father's research. But Paul was unfazed. Ethics meant nothing to him, only success. He declared himself the rightful owner of the discovery, dismissing Wei as a mere assistant. Demanding his vial back, he was directed to the fridge. But instead of his precious formula, he was met with the mutilated remains of Eve. As horror paralyzed him, Wei seized the moment, injecting him with a powerful sedative. When Paul awoke, he found himself strapped to a table, his neck exposed. Wei carefully grafted a new layer of skin onto him before injecting the substance. What followed was sheer agony. His body spiraled into an uncontrollable state of regeneration, an endless, grotesque cycle of growing flesh. His screams filled the house, catching the attention of a nearby neighbor. But before help could arrive, Wei calmly inserted a straw into his throat, ensuring he would remain alive just long enough to suffer. The neighbor, upon entering the house, gasped in terror at the horrific scene before her. Wei standing over Paul, his body grotesquely mutating beyond recognition. Luckily, she manages to escape before the deranged killer can catch her. But with her identity exposed and nowhere left to hide, Wei has no choice but to flee. She darts through the city in a desperate attempt to evade the police, who are now hot on her trail. Eventually, she stumbles into a subway station. She spots John, the homeless man she once met near her university. Without hesitation, she begs him for help. Moved by her desperation, John agrees, covering her with his blanket to shield her from view. However, in her panic, the vial she had been guarding so carefully shatters. The liquid spills onto both of them, instantly reacting upon contact with their skin. What follows is nothing short of a nightmare. Their bodies grotesquely fuse together, twisting into a horrifying amalgamation of misplaced limbs and distorted features. Time passes and Wei remains missing, though authorities uncover the bodies of Angela, Eve, and Jasmine. One evening, Angela's grieving mother, Aunt Lang, spots someone on the street who resembles Wei. Hope surges through her, but as she approaches, she realizes it's just a stranger. Disheartened, she turns away, only for something in the distance to catch her eye. A shiver runs down her spine as she moves closer, compelled by an eerie sense of familiarity. Then the blanket shifts. What emerges is a nightmarish fusion of John and Wei. Four eyes blinking in unnatural directions, facial features twisted and displaced in an inhuman configuration. As the screen fades to black, the film reaches its chilling conclusion. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like, it really helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching.